What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review, and today, well, this is one of the big anticipated releases of August for me. I am talking about the latest offering from Baest with COLOSSAL. This came out on August 15th, this time on Century Media Records, and this is the band's fourth album overall, and shock of all shocks, my first full experience with this band. Of course, I've always heard the name in passing, I've heard bits and pieces of a song here and there, and I really liked what I heard. It was just basically like old school Swedish death metal worship like Bloodbath, Entomb, Dismember, that HM2, Crunch, the whole nine yards, while mixing in aspects of other metal subgenres like thrash and most especially classic heavy metal. Well, this is my first full length I am listening to from this band, and, well, this one was different, to say the very least. It was quite different from what I was expecting to hear. But, with all that said, let's actually get into the song. So we kick off with Stormbringer, and the title alone kind of gives out a bit of an idea of what this album is going to go for musically. Like, excuse me. Like, there's some more classic rock moments on here. Like, the opening clean riff felt very classic rock-esque, almost like Deep Purple, which is appropriate with the song titled Stormbringer. But then it does get into a really cool, like, triplet swing and chug. Like, there's a lot of moments on this album, whenever you get into those, like, triplet rhythms, they alternate between feeling like a Black Sabbath kind of swing to a death metal triplet chug. Like, they alternate rather seamlessly a lot of times on this album. And the song itself, this opener, does have catchy riffs, although it definitely feels closer to, like, death and roll, and we're talking, like, later Entombed, like Wolverine Blues, DCLXVI, and Uprising in particular, like those albums. It's kind of like this album's kind of going for a modern twist on that sound, but with less of, like, the punk rock aspects of what Entombed did, and more embracing, like, classic heavy metal, because there's a lot of classic heavy metal all throughout this album. But on a couple of tracks, particularly the first three tracks, Stormbringer, Colossus, and In Loathe and Love, you get some little atonal melodies that kind of accent what's going on with the main riff or the main progression. But in Stormbringer, you do get some blast beats. Like, you still get blast beats on a good chunk of this album, but they're used very sparingly in songs. But the song Colossus, this was one of the heavier songs on the album. It's sludgy, it's groovy, it's almost like they took, like, the sludginess of Obituary, but mix it in with, like, the syncopated heft and chug and groove of Gojira. Like, it's almost like if Gojira and Obituary were the same band. That's kind of the vibe I get on this track, and you get some, like, more clean atonal melodies before it shifts into tremolo and, like, thrashy double time, which was a really cool tempo shift. And then in Loathe and Love, it's almost like a big push and pull dynamic between, like, Wolverine Blues-esque melodies with a Gojira groove, but it does get into, like, proper classic metal gallops and riffs, but with some thrashy sections. Triplet chugs and blast beats, but yeah, you do get some, like, crazy rhythm shifts going on here. And then the King of the Sun, this one is definitely going more towards classic heavy metal, but with death growls, but they do fit. I almost want to say it gives it a bit of a melodic death metal vibe, but it's not in the sense of, like, an At the Gates or an In Flames or an Insomnium or anything like that. I would say it's more like mixing classic heavy metal with old school death metal overtones. Like, there's some cowbell going on here, and the clean vocals done by Jesper Benzer from a band called DAD, which I had never heard of, but I guess they're one of the biggest hard rock bands in Denmark. But the song itself, I get a lot of nods to like classic Ozzy, which seems appropriate considering, we're still reeling from the loss of Ozzy, which still sucks. But then moving on in the album, we get Imp of the Perverse. Feels like very much death and roll, like the riffs, the melodies, just totally felt like more so, I would say, Uprising era Entomb, because there is a nice triplet death metal section with the riff when it chugs, but it does have a nice swing to it, and of course blast beats. Misfortunate Son, which is a interesting nod to Fortunate Son by CCR. This song is going for like both classic Ozzy but also like Judas Priest. Like the riffs and the rhythms and the double time gallops feel very 80s classic heavy metal. And I do like it for that reason because, again, I love 80s classic metal. Mouth of the River, though, it's definitely between this and Colossus for the heaviest song on the album. Like Mouth of the River, while you do get some like more like bordering on classic metal melodies and up-tempo moments, they feel more dark, they feel evil, they feel sinister. But for the most part, this song is going straight for like a Morbid Angel, tremolo, and double bass rhythm. It's just gross and filthy and dark. You do get a proper death metal triplet chug and groove on here as well. So it's definitely, like I said, between this and Colossus for the heaviest song on the album, because they both felt more like straight up death metal songs. Light the Beacons, which is an instrumental and the shortest track of the album at a little under 4 minutes. I actually really like this instrumental. It feels like, again, 80s Ozzy. Like, it feels like a perfect amalgamation of like the first 3 solo Ozzy albums, like Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman, but more especially Bark at the Moon. Like, it has some guitar moments that make you think of like what Randy Rhoads would have done, or even Jake E. Lee. Like, it has that sensibility to it. And of course, lead work across the board on this album is really tasteful. Like, they feel very much like classic heavy metal leads, and I do, again, like it for that reason. And then we get to the closer, Depraved World, which is the longest track of the album at 6 minutes. And again, classic metal all throughout, even grooves that feel like Judas Priest a little bit. And then you even get, again, that like push and pull dynamic between like a Sabbath swing and a death metal chug. Of course, blast beats show up again, and there's more harmonies going on this track, which harmonies didn't really show up that much on this album. They really came alive on this track. Now, production-wise, it's crisp, it's well mixed. I will say the guitar tone, definitely like toned down on the HM2 tone. It sounds like it's still maybe HM2, but with the settings changed to feel more clean, and then also probably mixed with another pedal to give it more of that like classic heavy metal touch. So, I mean, who knows, maybe they completely removed the HM2 tone altogether, but it sounds like there's still touches of it, but with the settings switched and mixed with like a pedal or two to kind of make it sound like the way it does. Now, I will say there are a couple of issues with this album. First, the rhythm shifts. Like, whenever they go from like a straight up 4/4 groove to triplet rhythms, sometimes they felt too abrupt on this album. Like, they didn't really transition very well at times. There are other times where they'll change it up and switch it up and it felt natural, but other times I would say it was most apparent on Depraved World, where it just goes from the straight up like classic metal gallop to the triplet swing. There was nothing to really transition to that moment. It was just like, okay, here you go, here's a triplet rhythm, because screw it. It just kind of felt like we just went from one thing to another without something to transition from one thing to the next. But of course, the other, I mean, it's not really an issue. It's definitely a thing with this album. This was definitely not what I was expecting, like seeing and hearing about them being very much like Bloodbath, Entombed, and Dismember Worship. I was expecting like gross, classic Swedish death metal with a modern touch. you don't really get a whole lot of that on here. If anything, the Entombed era it's touching on is the Death and Roll era of Entombed, which I know is a little divisive amongst fans. I am a fan of Wolverine Blues and Uprising in particular, not so much DCLXVI or even Inferno, but I will say the way Baest does this sound, it's executed really well. I mean, there's not a moment on here, apart from the rhythm shifts, would I say, like, oh, this riff was bad, or this was repetitive, or anything like that. No. It actually is performed very well, and it's tastefully done. It's just, it feels like a giant shift from where they started to where they are now, so yeah, this is definitely probably going to ruffle some feathers amongst fans, so I could definitely see mixed reviews about this, but for me, I'm going to give it a 3.5. Like, it's a strong 3.5. Like, it could go up, it could go down, but I will admit, the sound that they shifted to on this album, while it does feel a little bit like a harsh transition, I will admit, it's executed well, it's catchy, it's fun. Granted, I'll have to listen to the first 3 albums to really get the full scope of their previous sound. But yeah, I would say with this album, if you're a fan of like Death and Roll era Entombed, as well as like a lot of classic heavy metal and a couple songs that have like a Gojira or a Morbid Angel vibe, definitely give this a shot. I would say give it a listen, form your own opinion, and I'm going to be curious to hear what people have to say about this one. But of course, this was just my opinion. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until next time, thank you for watching, keep your horns high, and your dreams wet.